Good evening, and welcome to Dan Bain's Sleepy Time Mumbles, a podcast you can't miss. I'm Dan Bain, and every episode I improvise a low-stakes podcast for you to fall asleep to. Before we begin this evening's bonus episode, that's right, bonus episode, because it's not at the end of the month, so I guess that means I'm going to do another one at the end of the month. And so this is a bonus one. Before I begin that bonus episode, I'd like to read a little bit of listener mail. This listener feedback comes via Apple Podcasts from the United States of America, and comes from Beach Gal 60,001 60,001. That's a very specific number. They say, amazing sleep podcast. 5 golden stars. Now that's another 5 golden stars. So thank you very much, Beach Gal 60,001. That's really going to push that average up from that person that gave me 1 star and said that the chimes annoyed them. They also said they'd change their rating if I took the chimes out. You may have noticed I've taken the chimes out. Has that rating changed? No. Do I feel like I've compromised myself? A little bit. But they were contentious. So, anyway. Beach Gal 60,001 continues. They say, love falling asleep with a smile. Thank you. Please make more. Well, thank you. I'm glad to offer a sleepy smile. And yes, I'm in the process of making more right now. You're part of the content. Isn't that interesting? Thank you very much, Beach Gal 60,001, for taking the time out of your busy schedule to write a little bit of feedback. I really appreciate it. And it helps other people find the show via algorithms. If you would like to join Beach Gal 60,001, I'd love it if you left a review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you find your podcast. My co-host, Sophie the dog, is banging her bowl. So I'm just going to go and see what the emergency is. I assume it probably has something to do with biscuits, but we'll see. I'll be back in a moment to finish introducing the episode, but to you, it will seem as if I never left. This bonus episode will not be improvised. Usually I just open my mouth and see what falls out. But this evening, I've got 4 classic novels in front of me. I'm going to randomly pick them up, pick a page, read the page, and then switch book. And that should stop anyone getting too involved in the story. As always, there are many ways to follow and support the show, and all the links to that are in the show notes. But that can wait. For now, put down your screens, turn off your phone, close your eyes. Now it's time to be mumbled to sleep. Season 4, Episode 7. Random pages from classics. I had no such thing. I have nothing but his signature. Plague, pestilence and famine, battle, murder and sudden death upon him, says the old man, making a curse out of one of his few remembrances of a prayer and squeezing up his velvet cap between his angry hands. I have 1,000,000 of his signatures, I think. But you, breathlessly recovering his mildness of speech as Judy readjusts the cap on his skittleball of a head, you, my dear Mr. George, are likely to have some letter or paper that would suit the purpose. Anything would suit the purpose, written in the hand. Some writing in that hand, says the trooper, pondering. Maybe I have. My dearest friend, maybe I have not. No, says Grandfather Smallweed, crestfallen. But if I had bushels of it, I would not show as much as would make a cartridge without knowing why. So, I have told you why. My dear Mr. George, I have told you why. Not enough, says the trooper, shaking his head. I must know more and approve it. Then, will you come to the lawyer? My dear friend, will you come and see the gentleman? Urges Grandfather Smallweed, pulling out a lean old silver watch with hands like the leg of a skeleton. I told him it was probable I might call upon him between 10 and 11 this forenoon, and it's now 10:30. Will you come and see the gentleman, Mr. George? Says he gravely. I don't mind that. Though why this should concern you so much, I don't know. Everything concerns me that has a chance in it of bringing anything to light about him. Didn't he take us all in? Didn't he owe us immense sums all round? Concern me. Who can anything about him concern more than me? Not, my dear friend, says Grandfather Smallweed, lowering his tone, that I want you to betray anything. Far from it. Are you ready to come, dear friend? Aye, I'll come in a moment. I promise nothing, you know. No, my dear Mr. George, no. And you mean to say you're going to give me a lift to this place, wherever it is, without charging for it? Mr. George inquires, getting his hat and thick wash-leather gloves. This pleasantry so tickles Mr. Smallweed that he laughs, long and low before the fire. But ever while he laughs, he glances over his paralytic shoulder at Mr. George, and eagerly watches him as he unlocks the padlock of a homely cupboard at the distant end of the gallery, looks here and there upon the higher shelves, and ultimately takes something out with a rustling of paper, folds it, and puts it in his breast. Then Judy pokes Mr. Smallweed once, and Mr. Smallweed pokes Judy once. "I'm ready," says the trooper, coming back. "Phil, you can carry this old gentleman to his coach and make nothing of him." The Rangoon was soon within sight of Grand Andaman, the main island in the group, easily recognizable to navigators thanks to the picturesque mountain of Saddle Peak, 2,400 feet high. They stayed quite close to the coast. The savage inhabitants of the island were nowhere to be seen. They stand at the very bottom of the human scale, but it is wrong to call them cannibals. The panoramic view of the islands was magnificent. Immense forests of fan palms, areca palms, bamboo, nutmeg, teaks, giant mimosas and tree ferns made up the landscape to the foreground, and behind it stood the majestic backdrop of the mountains. The coastline was swarming with thousands of these precious sea swallows, whose edible nests provide the Chinese with one of their most sought-after delicacies. But the whole of this diverse spectacle offered by the view of the Andaman Islands soon came to an end, and the Rangoon headed swiftly for the Strait of Malacca, which led on to the China Seas. Meanwhile, what had become of Inspector Fix, who had been so unfortunately caught up in this journey of circumnavigation? As he was leaving Calcutta, he gave orders for the arrest warrant, if it ever arrived, to be sent to him in Hong Kong. He had been able to get on board the Rangoon without being noticed by Passepartout, and he hoped to remain undiscovered until the steamer arrived. It would indeed have been difficult for him to explain his presence on board without arousing Passepartout's suspicions, since the latter must have thought he was in Bombay. But as it turned out, he was destined to meet up with the dear fellow once again, in circumstances that will soon be explained. "I don't think I gave them as much as 500, Mitcher commented gloomily. "Didn't count it at the time, though. I was drunk. A pity." This time, Mitcher was sitting sideways with his back to the curtains. He listened gloomily, looking tired and melancholy, and seemed to be saying, "Oh, say what you like. It's all one to me now." "You must have spent more than 1,000 on them, sir," the landlord refuted firmly. "You flung your money about, regardless, and they picked it up. They're thieves and rascals, the lot of them. Horse thieves. Been driven away from here, or I dare say they'd have testified themselves how much they profited by you. I saw their money in your hands myself, sir. It's true, I didn't count it. You never let me, but from what I could see, I'd say it was more than 1,500. 1,500 indeed. Seen plenty of money in my time I have, and I can judge I can. As for the sum Dmitri had on him yesterday, the landlord declared point blank that as soon as he got off the cart, Dmitri had told him himself that he had bought 3,000 with him. Come now, are you quite sure? Mitya objected. Did I say in so many words that I bought 3,000? You did, sir. You said it before Andrei. Andrei is still here. He hasn't gone. You can send for him. And when you were treating the chorus in the drawing room, sir, you shouted yourself that you was leaving your 6,000 here, with what you spent before, that is. That's how it must be understood. Stepan and Semyon heard it, and Mr. Kalganov, too, was standing beside you at the time. And perhaps he, too, remembers it. The evidence of the 6,000 made a very great impression on the two officials. They liked the new version. 3 and 3 made 6, which meant 3,000 then and 3,000 now. And there, they had the 6,000. What could be clearer than that? All the peasants mentioned by the landlord were then interrogated. Stepan and Semyon, and the driver Andrei, as well as Peter Kalganov. The peasants and Andrei confirmed the landlord's evidence without hesitation. In addition, the officials wrote down word for word Andrei's account of his conversation with Mitya on the road, and Mitya's remark to the effect, "Where I am going to get to heaven or to hell, and will I be forgiven or not in the next world?" The psychologist, that is the public prosecutor, heard it all with a sage smile and ended up recommending that Mitya's remark about where he would get to should be added to the evidence. When his turn came, Kalganov came in reluctantly, looking sullen and capricious, and spoke to the public prosecutor and the examining magistrate as though he had met them for the first time in his life and not as old acquaintances whom he had been meeting every day. He began by declaring that he knew nothing about it and didn't want to know. But it seems that he did hear of the 6,000, and he admitted that he had been standing beside Mitya at the moment. He couldn't tell how much money Mitya had in his hands. He confirmed that the Poles had cheated at cards. He also explained, in reply to reiterated questions, that after the Poles had been turned out, Mitya's affair with Grushenka had certainly taken a turn for the better, and that she had said herself that she loved him. He spoke of her with restraint and respect, as though she were a lady of the best society, and never once allowed himself to call her Grushenka. In spite of his obvious repugnance to giving evidence, the public prosecutor interrogated him at great length, and it was only from him that he learnt all the details of what made up Mitya's romance that night. Mitya did not once stop Kalganov. At last the young man was allowed to go, and he left with unconcealed indignation. There isn't even anything discreditable about being duped under these circumstances, whereas every other situation reflects badly on a person, whether or not he is duped. Suppose someone is led by a lover's putative wealth to gratify him in the hope of making some money out of it. But his hopes are dashed. The lover turns out to be poor and he doesn't get any money. Well, it doesn't make any difference that he doesn't actually gain. It's still discreditable, because what he is seen to have revealed about himself is that he'll do anything, however servile, in the hope of financial gain. That is not to his credit. On the same principle, suppose someone is led by a lover's putative goodness to gratify him in the expectation of gaining, for his part, moral benefit from the lover's friendship, but his hopes are dashed. the man turns out to be a scoundrel and have no goodness to his name. Even so, being deceived in this way is all right, because the aspect of himself which he is seen to have shown is that he'd gladly do anything and everything for the sake of moral improvement, and there's nothing more creditable than that. So there's absolutely nothing wrong with gratifying a lover for the sake of virtue. This is the love which belongs with the celestial goddess. He is celestial too, and should be highly prized by communities as well as by individuals, since he impels a lover to pay a great deal of serious attention to the question of his own virtue, and does the same for the boy who is the object of the lover's affection. Any other kind of love there might be stems from the other goddess, the common one. Well, there you are, Phaedrus, he concluded. That's my contribution on love. It's the best I can do on the spur of the moment. This is a load off my mind, I do assure you, miss and gentlemen, said he, saluting us with great heartiness and drawing a long breath. And now I don't so much care how it ends. He scarcely seemed to be the prisoner. What with his coolness and his soldierly bearing, he looked far more like the prison guard. This is even a rougher place than my gallery to receive a lady in, said Mr. George, and I know Miss Summerson will make the best of it. As he handed me to the bench on which he had been sitting, I sat down, which seemed to give him great satisfaction. I thank you, miss, said he. Now, George, observed my guardian, as we require no new assurances on your part, so I believe we need give you none on ours. Not at all, sir. I thank you with all my heart. If I was not innocent of this crime, I couldn't look at you and keep my secret to myself under the condescension of the present visit. I feel the present visit very much. I'm not one of the eloquent sort, but I feel it, Miss Summerson and the gentleman, deeply. He laid his hand for a moment on his broad chest and bent his head to us. Although he squared himself again directly, he expressed a great amount of natural emotion by these simple means. First, said my guardian, can we do anything for your personal comfort, George? For which, sir? He inquired, clearing his throat. For your personal comfort. Is there anything you want and would lessen the hardship of this confinement? Well, sir, replied Mr. George after a little cogitation, I'm equally obliged to you, but tobacco being against the rules, I can't say that there is. You will think of many little things, perhaps, by and by. Whenever you do, George, let us know. Thank you, sir. Howsoever, observed Mr. George with one of his sunburnt smiles, a man who's been knocking about the world in a vagabond kind of way as long as I have, gets on well enough in a place like the present, so far as it goes. Next, as to your case, observed my guardian. Exactly so, sir, returned Mr. George, folding his arms upon his breast with perfect self-possession and a little curiosity. How does it stand now? Why, sir, it is under remand at present. Bucket gives me to understand that you will probably apply for a series of remands from time to time until the case is more complete. How it is to be made more complete I don't myself see, but I dare say Bucket will manage it somehow. Of course, it was only a matter of a second, and then even a ray of light from the sun takes 8 minutes to get to earth, and there I was, imagine it, in evening dress and open waistcoat. Spirits do not freeze, but once you've assumed human form. Anyway, I did a silly thing and set off, and you know, in those empty spaces in the ether and the water that is above the firmament, why, there's Such a frost, and you can hardly call it a frost. Just imagine 150 degrees below zero. You know the sort of game village girls play. They ask a callow youth to lick an axe in 30 degrees of frost. His tongue freezes to it once, and the stupid fellow tears the skin off so that it bleeds. Well, that's only in 30 degrees. And in 150, you only have to put a finger to the axe, and I should think there'd be nothing left of it. If only, that is, there could be an axe there. And could there be an axe there? Ivan suddenly interrupted absently and with a feeling of disgust. He was doing his utmost not to believe in his mad dream and not to lose his reason completely. An axe? The visitor repeated in surprise. Yes, what would happen to an axe there? Ivan suddenly cried with kind of fierce and insistent obstinacy. What would happen to an axe in empty space? But if it got far enough, it would, I think, begin circling the Earth as a sort of satellite. The astronomers would calculate the rising and the setting of the axe. Gatzuk would put it in his calendar, and that's all. You're stupid, you're awfully stupid, Ivan said cantankerously. You better lie more intelligently or I won't listen. You want to get the better of me by realism. You want to convince me that you exist, but I don't want to believe that you exist. I won't believe it. No, but I'm not lying. It's all true. Unfortunately, truth is hardly ever amusing. I can see that you positively expect something big from me, and perhaps something beautiful too. That's a great pity, for I only give what I can. Don't philosophize, you ass. How can you expect me to philosophize when the whole of my right side is numb, and I'm moaning and groaning? I've consulted all sorts of doctors. They can diagnose excellently. They'll tell you all your symptoms. They have your illness at the fingertips, but they've no idea how to cure you. I happened to come across a very enthusiastic little medical student. You may die, he told me, but at least you'll have a very good idea of what illness you're dying of. And then again, the way they have of sending you to specialists. Oh, we can only diagnose your disease, they tell you. You better go to such and such a specialist, and he'll be sure to cure you. I tell you, the old-fashioned doctor who used to cure you of all illnesses has quite disappeared. Now there are only specialists, and they all advertise in the papers. If there's anything wrong with your nose, they'll send you to Paris. There's a European specialist there who cures noses. You go to Paris, he examines your nose. I'm sorry, he tells you, I can only cure your right nostril, for I don't cure left nostrils. It's not my speciality. You better go to Vienna. There you'll find a special specialist who'll cure your left nostril. What are you to do? I tried popular remedies. A German doctor arrived me to rub myself with honey and salt on a shelf in a bathhouse. I went just to get the extra bath. Got myself covered all over with honey and salt, but it was no good at all. In despair, I wrote to Count Mattei in Milan. He sent me a book and some drops. Oh, well, I don't blame him. And just imagine, Hoff's malt extract cured me. I bought it by accident, drank a bottle and a half of it. I was fit as a fiddle. I could even dance if I wanted to. I made up my mind to publish my thank you to him in a letter to the press. My feeling of gratitude urged me to do it. And well, you know, not a single newspaper would publish it, and for quite an extraordinary reason. It'd be very reactionary, they said. No one will believe it. You'd better publish it anonymously, they advised me. But what kind of thank you is it if it's anonymous? That was Season 6, Episode 7 of Dan Bain's Sleepy Time Mumbles. Sleepy Time Mumbles is produced by Noose Octopus and is created and presented by me, Dan Bain. Follow the show in the links. And we'll see you next time. Good night. Sleep tight.